Welcome back to the neighborhood for our final episode in our month of spooky, scary Halloween content. On this episode, the gang's all here to discuss the casting of Frank Stone. Welcome to the podcast where three longtime friends talk about video games from the average gamer's perspective. My name is Andrew Kimball.
I'm Dylan Wren.
And I'm Aubrey Summer.
And we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
Before we dive in, I just want to remind you that we are on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where you can keep up with the show and enjoy our short-form content. We're also on YouTube, where we have reviews, rankings, video essays, and more. And if you want to be part of future episodes like this one, or if you just want to be part of a growing community of awesome people, join our Discord server with the link in the podcast description. So, Dylan, you're here.
I am here.
Aubrey, you're here.
I am here.
But we brought back the entire Quarry crew for some reason.
Whoa. It's not too late for us to all walk out in protest.
Yeah.
You think you can get out?
No, it's too late.
Back of the couch.
After what it took to get here, we're doing this.
So the voices you're hearing, we are joined on this episode by Joe Summer.
Hello.
Delaney Wren.
Hello.
And Abby Kimball.
Hi.
So the reason that all of you are here, this whole big happy family is here, is because we all played through the newest Supermassive game together, like we did with The Quarry, and like various people from this group have done with various other Dark Pictures games. This game is a little bit different in that it was like tied in with Dead by Daylight, which we'll get into. But before we dive into like discussing the game proper, I will say right now, this episode is full spoilers. We're not segmenting it. These games don't really have much gameplay, so all we really have to discuss is story and character stuff and decisions that we made. And just to keep it simple with this amount of people, we'll just flat out call this a Spoilercast. Everything's on the table, and potentially other Supermassive games as well will be brought up and mentioned. It's not our intention to spoil the older games, but I know on our Quarry episode we, compared it a lot to the other games they had made. So
Yeah.
And I mean, this game is 5-6 hours tops. So like, if you care that much, just go play it.
Right, go play it, then come back.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan is our Dead by Daylight expert.
Okay.
Why don't you give kind of an overview of the casting of Frank Stone before we kind of start picking it apart?
Yeah. So the casting of Frank Stone follows... It's one of those that follows like several different timelines. And so it's got a timeline set at the very beginning that's like in the 60s, where they are trying to hunt down somebody who has been murdering people. They don't know that it's Frank Stone at this point. And so Sam is like a cop who is hunting them down.
Sam Green, badge number 242.
Yes,
424.
that was
Darn
Delaney.
it.
That was Delaney's
2424.
Delaney's character.
I thought it was 242.
But so like at the beginning in the 60s timeline, they're looking for like a missing baby. And so they're looking for him. Sam finds like that somebody at the mill has been murdering people, hunts them down, and kills them.
This is all like the intro.
Yeah, this is the intro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it kind of bounces back and forth between two other like timelines. And so there's one that's set in the 80s where it is Jaime, Chris, Linda, and who was the other one? What was
It's
Sam's
Sam's son. He's not a playable character.
No.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Sam Jr.
But
Something
No.
we'll talk about as we get into this.
Yeah.
game is like the
No.
characters.
it does.
feel like
Robert.
Robert
does sound right.
It does not.
Okay. Well, he's your son. So
I was an absent father.
that's not true, though.
I was too busy at the mill in my trauma.
I mean, Robert does sound right. I just can't remember.
Who can Google it fastest?
It's Robert.
Is it
It is
really?
Robert.
It is Robert. You
Nailed
don't even know your own son's name. Anyway, so
His mom named him. I personally call him Jamie.
okay, well,
Jamie?
so
You mean Jaime?
yeah,
No,
the,
his
Yeah,
name's Jamie.
the 1980s storyline follows Jaime, Linda, Chris, and Robert,
And Bonnie.
and Bonnie,
And Bonnie.
as they are like making a film set at the mill. They're just trying to make like a horror movie, and they kind of find out about the like murders and stuff that happened at the mill as they're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a present day, quote unquote, timeline where Linda is Linda, and then
Maddie.
Maddie, and then Jane. What's his name?
I don't like
The-
Dan Bun
Pants.
guy.
The douchebag guy.
Yeah.
He would be a Chad. I don't think that's
Yeah,
his name. but-
basically.
We're going to call him Chad, though.
The characters in this game are such caricatures.
Yeah. But they were invited to like this mansion by a mysterious person named Augustine, who wants like their sections of the film that was made in the 80s. And so the whole like storyline is kind of bouncing back and forth, like I said, between the 80s and between present day. And you're trying to kind of figure out like, well, what happened in the 80s? And then also like, why does
How does that
Augustine
connect to the
want
modern?
yeah, why does she want this and what's going on? Augustine seems very sketchy.
Right.
And then as it progresses, you find out that like Augustine is trying to summon the entity into the world, and she's using the film strip to do that she's getting from the characters in the present day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also like a machine that allows them to travel between multiple dimensions and all that kind of like, it gets very multiversal and kind of weird and convoluted at that point. The story was already a
Yeah.
little convoluted, and that just like made it exponentially more convoluted.
Well, she's collecting the film strips from across like multiple universes because each of them capture some of the essence of Frank Stone. And so there's some from alternate timelines where it's the murder mine instead of the murder mill. But then ultimately, once that's all brought together, she can basically pull Frank Stone out of there and offer him as a gift to the entity from Dead by Daylight.
Yes.
I think specifically she's going like the whole thing at the manor that she does where she calls the people there and tries to reassemble it. Augustine's done that like hundreds of times.
Mm-hmm.
And then that modern day timeline is the one where she succeeds. But the two other like points in time that we play through are from different
Yeah.
universes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is how, like, at the very beginning, when Sam Green shoots Frank Stone, and it's like, oh, fate sealed, you saved the baby. And you're like, is there a world where I don't save the baby? That feels kind of integral to the plot.
Mm-hmm.
And they can explain that away because, oh, if you miss and the baby dies, then that's just that timeline, and that has, like, no consequences going forward.
Yeah.
Is the multiverse a big thing in Dead by Daylight, or did they throw that in here just to confuse the whole thing even more?
I mean, Dead by Daylight is horror Fortnite.
Yeah.
So it is kind of multiverse. Like
It's
they
not
have
like
survivors and killers from a bunch of other properties.
Yeah, it's not like a huge thing. Like, it's not like that's all they talk about, and it's like this weird, like end game level thing that's always constant, but it is present in Dead by Daylight. All of the survivors are from, like, there are multiple versions of each survivor
Okay.
running around, which is
So
how
it
they
didn't-
explain away if you have 4 people playing the same survivor.
Okay.
They're like, they're from different multiverses.
Yeah,
So
I think if you
variants.
had played Dead by Daylight, some of the plot issues would have been much more obvious from the get-go, whereas I was confused about things like when Bonnie got hooked,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like, but hang on, but Bonnie's like Maddie's mom, like how does that work? And they drop clues in there, and if you think multiverse, then it is obvious.
Yeah.
but there's some sort of like, how does this all make sense? And then it's like, oh, it's multiverse, so they can just do whatever they want and say that was from a different place.
Timeline,
yeah. And then because of the time jumps, you're not actually following one character all the way through to be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. They segment them so that you're only like, if one dies, it's just that version, and if they're still in the modern day, then they're just like, oh, it's a different version of them.
Which is conceptually kind of cool and pretty sci-fi, but I don't know that this game really executed / justified / explained it well enough for it to
No, by the time it really sinks in, like the game is about to end. So you don't have that cool moment of like, oh, this is what's going on, and then here's where the story could go with it. That's just in the end.
Yeah.
They only had 6 hours.
Well, and I feel like there's a bit of it where it wants to be like Tenet, where you watch Tenet through the first time and it's like it has the twist happen like 2/3 of the way through, and then it really wants you to watch Tenet again and be like, oh, there's that thing that I didn't realize was,
well, that's most of Christopher Nolan's movies is like rewatches or almost mandatory.
Yeah, whereas this is very much like, I kind of feel like it wants you to play it a second time or multiple times, and it's set up in a way where it tries to encourage that too, because like,
I mean, all of the
but this one feels way more like it wants you to replay it, because it'll let you just jump into any point in the story and go from there, versus a lot of the other ones where you had to do like a full replay.
It's a weird choice though, because all roads lead to the same conclusion ultimately. Like, you cannot stop Frank Stone from coming into existence. You cannot stop him. Like you there's no ending. Based on everything I read after the fact, there's no ending where he doesn't come into being and any number of the people who survive aren't around that campfire.
Yeah, which is a very Dead by Daylight, I think, thing. But yeah. And I think all of the Dark Pictures games and the Quarry and like the Until Dawn and everything, I think they all kind of, it's like they're, I don't know, like yam shaped or something, where it's kind of like they start very like they always start in the same place and then they spread out in the middle, but then they all kind of like converge at the end. I think this one is just way more obvious about that, because most of the other games, it's like, you know, like Little Hope always ends in the same way, and like, yeah, your characters may live or die based on decisions you've made at that point, but the ending's always the same.
The Quarry had a variety of potential.
Yeah.
The Quarry had like 2 main endings.
The Quarry really felt like that, where in the middle of the game it feels like things have branched out and you're making all these impactful decisions, and it could play out like all these different ways, and then you get down to the end and you get your ending, and then you look up some of the other endings and you're like, oh, this all funnels back into like basically the same ending with like a heads and a tails.
Well, it's like the Quarry was more of like how far did you take the ending and how much information did you get?
Yeah.
There's like there's an ending and a true ending with the Quarry, and there is that sort of in this. We just messed up the choices to get there.
Well, but with the Quarry, you could have cured any number of like the Hacketts if you got the right amount of information. You could have like found the original like werewolf and solved that problem. You could have killed any number of the Hackett.
Like, how deep into it did you get?
Yeah, it still felt like there were at least 2 possible endings where you saved some people, or, you know, you did what we did and just killed all of the Hacketts. But
it did feel like we had, or not that we had more choice, but the choices we made mattered more in the Quarry. Yep. Whereas this one, I was like, I don't really feel like anything I do makes a difference.
Well, because it was like playing 3 smaller game, like 3 different stories, because there was a 60s timeline which only Delaney played, and then
Sam Green, badge number 424,
and then the 80s
242.
the 80s timeline, which didn't feed into the 2024 timeline at all, because it was a different timeline. Which one?
We gave Joe's character the charm, because if you don't give Joe's character or Chris the charm, then she can go back to the 80s and like prevent everything from happening.
Theoretically, but also in my reading, it just kind of delays it. And instead of making Murder Mill, they make Murder Mine.
Well, it is a cycle, but yeah.
Yeah.
And it is the whole like multiverse thing. Like then what's her name just moves on to a different multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like you've saved yours, but there's still more.
There's a bunch of multiverses, and she's already done this in a bunch of them and failed, and we were just the ones who screwed it up ultimately.
Well,
I mean, she's got a ton of film footage, so we're not the only ones who failed. We're among the many who, quote unquote, failed.
yeah.
But in these choice-based games, kind of going back to that point, most of them follow that formula of like, you flavor your experience,
Mm-hmm.
but for a game to actually take all the like middle branching decisions and then branch that out again into like endings is just a huge ask. So like,
Yeah.
The Witcher has like 3 endings.
Yeah.
The Telltale games are very much like flavor your experience. And
Even like Baldur's Gate or, you know, some of those.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like-
Baldur's Gate's a great one for that. Like what you were describing with like start at one point and at also one point.
Mhm.
Each act in Baldur's Gate 3, like Act 2 felt like, oh, I've got to like decide all these things and be careful about how I proceed because I see all the ways this could go. And then you play through Act 2 and you're like, oh, never mind. I could have been like as evil as I wanted to be, and I would have gotten to exactly the same point.
Mhm.
There was no other way for this to have happened, but you don't know that the first time you play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like if a game does it well, then like you don't notice it. And then a game's like Frank Stone, where they didn't disguise it
It's
as
only
well.
once you look it up
Yeah.
and you're like, what are the other endings? And you go, oh, never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And so and it's one of those things too, where it's like, if you know, even the basics about programming or video game design, it's kind of just like, yeah, it would be impossible. Like Andrew was saying, to have
to
like,
just keep branching.
it's like, okay, you start here and then you make 2 choices. Like it does not take many choices for it to become like, now there are like 300 different endings we have to program in,
It's the butterfly effect.
Yeah. And I do think some of these games could do a little bit more
mhm.
in the ending department, but part of the issue is that for every ending, especially with something like the Quarry or Frank Stone or Baldur's Gate, every ending requires a lot of like voice acting capture, motion capture for the
Mhm.
cutscenes, and that's a lot of time and work.
Mhm.
But when I think to like the Fallout games, like Fallout 3 and New Vegas, they actually had like 5 or 6 different endings, especially New Vegas. But all they needed to do for each of those endings was write dialogue, like have it show up, and then have the voice actors just dub it over. There was no, okay, now we need,
Mhm.
an extra week in the capture studio with the mocap suits to get the facial animations.
Yeah.
And so I think
Down just
Cyberpunk
right.
is probably the like most recent best example of like actually a variety of endings.
Mm.
Yeah,
Like,
Cyberpunk
there's
calls
quite a
back
few.
to Fallout, where
But
you
it's a
have
shorter game.
Yeah, you have
as
your
far as
like
RPGs like that go.
I think you have your 4 or 5 main endings, and then in each ending, you kind of see your impact like on the world based on who calls you.
Mhm.
You have your moment to like call all your friends, or some of them at the end of the credits, like people will call and leave voicemails for V. And I think I really like that touch, and Fallout does it, where at the very end, like a lot of the side characters and stuff you did, the game brings them up to show like, here's how this played out in the long run. And so even though your main story is kind of like, yeah, I'm being funneled back down to sort of one ultimate conclusion, when all of the side stuff is personalized to you, it makes it feel like your choices had a lot more like impact.
Mhm.
I want to go back to Frank Stone. I want to throw a question mostly towards Delaney and Abby. Was this game scary?
No. Well,
Well, actually,
Like we're talking about spooky kind of Halloween
Not-
theme. That's the whole reason we did this.
I don't think it was as scary as the Quarry. Like
It definitely
the
was
Quarry.
not.
Like there are points where I had the blanket up to my chin.
I will say, I feel like I was one of the few people who played where like being actively chased by the killer, and that was pretty spooky. But percentage-wise, that was not a lot of the experience.
No, it was like the first 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you didn't play for
Well, I think
hours.
it was supposed to be 10 minutes. I think I did drag it out for a good 45.
Yeah. I mean,
But you walked like right past the
collectibles.
engageable thing to like get out of the level or whatever. Like, but yes.
And
Wait, what?
Keyword on walked.
Yes.
Yeah, like you walk, like this is the very obvious part where you're supposed to hop the fence and you're like, I don't know where to go.
At that point, I was still trying to get collectibles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, definitely
Which you walked right past.
Yeah, this for
You-
me was a let's power through this.
You literally were like, no, I'm not going to get that out of spite.
Which I think
And
if you're
walked right past
playing a group game, I think we need to come to
we need to all
an
agree
agreement
on-
ahead
on,
of
like,
time.
what we're
do
doing.
collectibles or not? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised as
I'm
a
a
Capricorn,
collectibles
you're not a collector.
See, I have to enjoy a game and then I'll want to go get all the collectibles.
That's not what it's about. It's you're not a collector then. Like if there is not like I have to find it, then you don't count as a collector.
You're not a gamer.
As we established playing through this game, I was the only real gamer.
I know.
That's why you failed so many times.
Yeah, these quick time events were brutal.
It really made up for the quarry where you didn't play hardly at all. Like
Yeah, it did
you were
keep throwing it back to me.
Yeah.
were Linda. You were in a lot of the game.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, like, there was only a couple spots where I felt like it kind of got scary, but wasn't even really scary. It was just suspenseful.
Yeah. I feel like that's a better word. When we were actually, I think the 80s was probably the spookiest part where we had to use the camera.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually play that part, so I couldn't
I didn't
speak
either.
to it for real.
Well, I mean, I did. I got the character, and then I walked, and then it was like, oh, change to the next person. I was like, oh, okay. That was
What was the one where
not necessary.
it was literally like 3 minutes where Andrew
yeah, just
I passed
walked
the controller,
around.
Andrew made one like dialogue choice, and then it like cut to like, and that was chapter 8. Here's chapter 9.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
like our whole last play session was like, how many chapters are in this game? And we looked it up, and then we're like, oh, wow, we still have like 7 chapters to go. And then
And it
we
was like,
ran
boom,
through
boom,
them
boom,
all
boom.
in 30, 45
It
minutes.
was
Yeah.
so
That's
fast.
weird. And I don't know if that's based on choices we made earlier in the game or what.
Some of it is.
Good job, us.
There are two
We were
two
off.
points where we definitely diverged from more content. Like one of them was Andrew missing his like skill check with the generator.
suck.
And then Frank Stone came and like grabbed Linda and hooked her.
Yeah.
Apparently if you don't do that, you can do a lot more exploration as Linda and find out a lot more backstory about like Frank Stone, and that's where you find out that Jaime is the baby
Was the
from the
baby, yeah.
beginning.
Oh, it was Jaime?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the second one,
And he was a baby in the modern story.
and then
Big old baby.
the second part that diverged
Wasn't
was
great.
when like Joe's character died because we mistakenly thought, hey, let's give this person we like the little charm.
Yeah.
And then that apparently killed him when he tried to go through the portal. There was a whole, I guess, section where Chris kind of goes back to the 80s and does some stuff there
I
that
feel
we
like-
missed out on.
Yeah, we lost a couple people kind of in rapid succession there in that last chapter.
Yeah.
Some intentionally, some unintentionally.
Yeah.
I think the developers did that thing with the charm on purpose. They were like, let's make this little pink pants Chad annoying enough that nobody's going to want to save him, but that's the only way to save the rest of your characters if you're a good person and give it to Chad.
I looked it up. His name is Bruno Stanford III.
It's Chad.
Bruno Stanford III is equally.
Did they call him?
Yeah.
They called him Stan.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I was like, they did not call him Bruno.
No.
We don't
No, he went by Stan.
Bruno. No.
He might be the worst character in
Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
any Supermassive game.
He
I've
was
played.
horrible.
Which, like, he was supposed to be.
Yeah, he was
but
designed to
also-
be. They
yeah.
did a great job, but he was like,
But he wasn't like unlikable in a Littlefinger kind of way where it was like, oh man, this character is so
No.
well like written and acted, and
Mhm.
no.
it was just like, this is the most obnoxious caricature of this archetype.
Yeah. I mean, to the earlier point about like time and resources required to do multiple endings to the extent that most people actually want them, It was also noted that it felt like they literally went with the first line read the actors gave, or they didn't stumble over any words. Like,
good enough.
I mean, before we get into like production quality, what did you guys think of the character? Like, did you connect with any characters? Because I felt like when we played the Quarry, we were all like, Dylan's cool. We like Dylan. We like, there was a handful of characters that we really enjoyed.
Brenda Song.
Yeah, Brenda Song.
All the stuff she did as an NPC.
And then there were some, like, there were some characters in the Quarry that were like dumb or dorky or cheesy, but like, it felt more enjoyable.
Yeah, and you felt like you wanted to save everybody. Like, you still wanted to.
Yeah, like the little redhead I played, whose name escapes me, she felt like final girl potential, and so I was really
who was the
hoping.
meathead in the Quarry that like goes skinny dipping?
Brent or Bread or something like that.
Like, I think
it might have been Brad. But like just
who did I play?
You played as Brett and as the like floppy haired guy who was the little redhead was crushing on him.
What? We don't remember because we each had to play two. They only had to keep up with one.
Yeah. He got turned into a werewolf.
Okay,
floppy haired guy. And I
spoiler
think we technically saved him because we killed all the Hacketts.
Oh, that's true. Because at the end you saw him.
Yeah,
like,
you see him in the woods all disheveled and like.
But in Frank Stone, did you like any of those characters?
No.
Yeah.
Well, hold on.
I didn't connect with any of them. I thought they were like
Delaney
fine.
liked
they
Bonnie.
Were obnoxious.
Wasn't it Bonnie?
Did I like Bonnie?
The goth
Who'd you
girl?
keep talking about? Who'd you keep talking about?
Sam. Green. Badge number 242.
No.
I do feel like Sam Green's character was the best.
He was.
Out of all of them.
Probably because
that's
his
what they started
his
with.
first line reads were the best. Because I think that what you just mentioned, Aubrey, made it really hard to connect with these characters when their line reads and
bad.
Were 7 out of 10 times were just like they went with that.
I will say, I think Linda was obnoxious as a character, but I don't necessarily. I think that was a choice by the voice actor.
Linda wasn't. Yeah,
I didn't mind Linda.
I think the voice actor did a decent job with her. It felt intentional on her part, as opposed to like she just was reading it.
Yeah.
Well, and I found the 80s characters kind of hard to connect with, like that general era. But the 2024, like aside from Stan. Like, we didn't get as much time with that version of them. So, like, Maddie was fine. She didn't get enough time to do much of anything. And then Linda in 2024 felt like she should have caught on to some stuff faster than she did. Like, it felt like you're smarter than this. You are.
Like, you've got all this. Like,
yeah, you've got to be picking up on some of this.
Kind of felt to me like the characters in, like, they weren't the same characters.
No, which they're different timelines.
Yeah, I guess the timeline thing can write that off.
Yeah.
But it was like, it felt like a set of different characters per story arc.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to believe that they were the same people.
And then Sam, when he came to 2024, which I think he was the Sam from the 60s.
I think he was
that ended up in 24.
I think he was the original Sam.
He was just unhelpful. Like, he refused to explain anything to anybody.
Whoa.
And I get the being like, I'm traveling through dimensions. I'm a part of this secret organization, called the whatever, and we're trying to stop this thing from happening. Like, yeah, maybe Linda doesn't believe you. But you could at least say, yeah, this woman is obsessed with collecting this film and she is trying to do something bad with it. And we have to
heads up.
Yeah.
Help at all.
There's already enough weird stuff at that point that the characters have seen that it's like, this is not that big of a stretch.
Yeah.
Like some guy being like, I'm from another dimension is not going to like really throw you off that much. Like, you guys have seen Endgame. This is set in 2024. Like, you get it.
True. Especially because like Maddie pulled Chris out of the hologram or whatever it's called. Like,
was that, I think she did that after Sam was there though. Or
I don't think so. No? I think Sam showed up.
I don't feel like Chris was. I think Chris showed up.
Isn't that when Sam pulled Linda aside to like explain some stuff to her, and then Maddie went after Chris?
I think they
got in a fight.
They separated at that point.
Stan like ran off or whatever, and Maddie went after.
Maddie went after Stan, and so.
And
which
found
was
that
another fatal flaw. This is clearly a horror thing. Why are we splitting the group?
Exactly.
Because it's a horror thing.
But also, like, Maddie's story, whenever it does cut to, like, 2024, and you see part of Maddie's story. You think that like you'll get a little bit more explaining into
Nope.
like what her nightmares
Right, because she's like
were.
dipping into psychological horror
Yeah.
where she's like
Mhm.
seeing
And she's
hallways
like,
that aren't there and stuff.
yeah, and
Yeah.
she's like going through all this, which I mean, I guess they kind of explain it because they're like, oh, the film's cursed. So when her mom died and gave the film to her, then she gets the curse. But like,
Mhm.
It kind of felt like they were like, oh, shoot, this was supposed to be spooky. We gotta,
yeah,
hold
it was,
on. We
it was
gotta,
almost like they ran out of
we gotta make
budget.
it.
So they like film, like they did the beginning part of like her spooky origin story.
Yeah, the little
And then
PT
they were
wannabe
like-
where she looped through her house 4
Yeah,
times.
and then they were like, you know what? Actually, we're not going to continue this. We're just going to pretend like that didn't happen. And at the end,
Mhm.
she's in the woods like she was at the beginning, but it didn't.
Yeah, I think that part is like a Dead by Daylight thing.
Yeah.
Like I think the entity like gives you like these nightmares and starts making you see some of this stuff if it's gonna like suck you into the.
That's my next question is, do you think that it being in the Dead by Daylight universe or tied to Dead by Daylight did this game a service or
I think it did a disservice because like he knew what was going on, but he's played the game. For us, or for me, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like they could have at least explained a little bit of that.
yeah, I think
It's
if you
just
have
kinda
like
like-
the context of some of the Dead by Daylight stuff, it helps explain some of the choices that they made.
Mhm.
But I don't think it makes them the right choices for telling a good story.
Yeah,
I think like the ending, especially if you haven't played. Like I've played maybe a tiny bit of Dead by Daylight, so I kind of got what they were going for with the ending. But that was definitely like it's an ending for fans of
Yeah,
the game,
for
and if you're
certain
not a
people.
fan, you're just gonna be kind of confused.
You're gonna
or
in the game and be
it's
like,
gonna
what
land
the
on its
just
face.
happened?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But if you're really into it, I imagine that's probably like a cool ending.
Well, and I think, and I don't know if we missed it somewhere. I haven't come across it in a ton of or in any of the reading I think that I've done on some of the lore stuff. But why does Augustine want to make a killer? What does that get her?
no, I'm
Yeah,
I
with
think she
you on
wants
that.
to
It gets her
summon
dead.
the entity, and
Yeah, but for what?
For-
I mean, it's your typical like crazy cult person where
Yeah.
it's like they think that they're like ushering in a new world and then will be like ruling in that
Which-
new world sort of thing.
She did kind of think that.
Yeah,
And
like,
then like she was like, I helped you do this. And then it was like, but now I'm going to kill you.
yeah,
So like,
And then
joke's
She-
on you?
yeah, she thought she was going to be like a sidekick. And really she was just.
Yeah,
means
she thought
to
the
an end.
entity was like this like
Murdered.
perfect being, and she was gonna learn all sorts of things.
Mhm.
And then Frank Stone killed her.
killed
Yeah.
one version of her, because then at the end there's
Two more versions.
Oh,
of
the
her.
old
yeah.
version of her with the cloak was already there and didn't get speared, and then another version of her came out of the little whirligig thing. So
I think the most disappointing thing about Augustine is she has this multiverse hopping, time hopping, like whatever and she chooses with that power what she's going to do is try and summon the end of the world. You could do so much with that. You could have had so much fun. No, we're going to try and kill the world.
I'm gonna give a cursed camera to
Yeah.
children in the 80s.
I feel like if we had access to that, we would have way more fun than that.
Well, apparently going through it does give you brain damage, so
Well,
Going through the portals.
that's what happened. Like Sam had his whole little episode or whatever. Supposedly, it's believed that going through it gives you brain damage. So
that's
maybe
fair.
that's why she thought something good was going to happen when she brought about
Well, and
a
yeah,
soul devouring monster from
like you
God
could
knows where.
you could be the ruler of the world without bringing a soul devouring monster if you had a time hoppy multi-dimension portal thing.
Somehow it feels like though there are a lot more variables with a plot that isn't involving just getting a ton of cursed film. You got to make people like you if you want to do it in like a positive way, and that's hard.
So we'll get into our verdicts like later in the episode, but just kind of generally speaking, none of us are super high on the story for this game.
Nah.
I wanted to like this game.
I was excited about it.
It's the kind of typical horror thriller thing where Like when you're in it and you don't know what's going on, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I want to see what happens next. And you get to the end and you think back over the story and you kind of don't like it. Just like, oh, that was it.
Mhm.
Well, in stories like this, stories in like horror or suspense or, even kind of like mystery stuff, like the payoff has to be good, has to be worth it to justify the journey. Because, like you said, when you're in the middle of it, you want to see how it pays off and like, what are we working towards? And then if that just kind of falls flat or falls apart, then it makes the whole experience like a little bit more sour than if the ending actually like paid off.
Mhm.
Yeah, which I can respect, like having a majority of the endings be like, oh yeah, any number of characters that you get through it still end up at the campfire, like going into the Dead by Daylight universe. But I feel like there should be at least one ending where you do stop Frank Stone.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that comes down to what you want out of a horror movie and if you're a horror movie fan. Because, I mean, most horror movies that are held up as good don't end with end with the best case scenario being a horribly traumatized person and the killer still at large,
Yeah.
But,
So theoretically, if we're talking, we're not going to change the end, you still end around the campfire. The kindest thing for any of the characters was to get them killed so they weren't stuck in this endless loop of being hunted by killers.
theoretically.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know at what point like the entity actually shows up. And so since we didn't get anyone besides like Stan and Chris killed
And Sam.
But Sam was kind of like a weird edge case scenario. I feel like no one got hooked and taken by the entity. Like, I don't know.
Was that a possibility?
I don't know. We
But
didn't.
only Maddie made it to the circle, right?
And
I think
Linda
Linda
was there.
did too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have.
Was she already there?
She was sitting there. Maddie had the whole like walking through the forest and then approached, and Linda's like, he's waiting for you. And then Frank Stone comes lumbering out of the woods after him.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was like one of those things where even if like Frank Stone had killed Linda and she was taken by the entity and then she still shows up at the end, I don't know. Because I haven't investigated that much. Like, I don't know how much variance there was there. Because there's a part of it where like you keep the survivors in Dead by Daylight keep getting killed in the matches, but then they keep coming back at the campfire, and like it's just kind of this like perpetual thing, like cyclical ritual situation.
I'm going to be honest. I don't feel like if I played Dead by Daylight, I would need them to explain like why.
Well,
you
don't
don't.
worry. They
happening.
don't.
Yeah.
They don't. This is all like extra
Okay.
like lore
Yeah.
tidbits
Like-
that you
Dead
can
by
read
Daylight.
about.
Like-
This is
Yeah,
not
you
ever
don't need any
explained
of
in the
that.
game.
I was
So-
going to say, like, we could just, as a gamer, please note the quotation marks. I don't need them to explain, like, why you have a match that recur. Like, I don't need them to explain the reset button. I think we could all just move on with that.
Yeah, I mean, in Dead by Daylight, it's not. It's just like a fun horror multiplayer experience.
Mhm.
And
Fun horror game.
but if you if you were to try to explain,
People like lore.
a way that this could keep happening, it would be cycles and multiverses. If Frank Stone had ended with Linda sitting between Nicolas Cage and Lara Croft, it'd go up an entire point for me.
Yeah.
That's a whole letter grade right
Yeah.
there.
Nick Cage is sitting there just like, I'm doing this for my kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or my nephew or whoever it is that he like got in Dead by Daylight for.
Yeah.
On the opposite side, how are we feeling about the gameplay in these games?
Oy. In these games, I'm not mad at it. And this one in particular, it was sparse.
Like,
yeah.
I know like we enjoy these because we can all play them too. Like it's a kind of a
Mhm.
group fun thing to do on the weekend, and
Yeah. We all laugh at Delaney's sweaty palms and Abby hiding under a blanket. And
Yeah, even though they claim that it was not scary and that
Release
there
the
was
tapes.
there was definitely
I
A lot
have a
of-
medical condition.
there was definitely
I have
hiding behind a
glaucoma.
blanket and
it's called caring too much.
Yeah. But like the gameplay breaks down to, other than making decisions, it's walking around while holding the left bumper to walk slightly faster,
Mhm.
and then
No.
quick time events that don't loop around.
They do not repeat.
No, you have to hit them on the first
so
go
if
around.
you mess it up, you messed it up.
Yeah,
I didn't-
The generator mechanic was.
I didn't get to do the generator mechanic.
No.
But this is the exact level of gameplay that I want in a game like this. To be quite honest,
Like a game like this, yeah.
Yeah.
because it's more of a party game in my opinion. Like it's a social thing. Like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to try that hard. I played this on easy. I have zero regrets. I don't want it to be much more than it is. Like the quick time events are good. The walking, the walking, running, whatever. It's about the perfect level of gameplay. They could have thrown in a couple more quick time events maybe to keep me engaged. Maybe.
Do you think that having like collectibles and stuff like that
Yes.
is necessary?
Yes.
I think you're
Yeah.
you're the main person that was against the collectible.
It just feels like when you're doing a narrative kind of story-based experience, like, do we really, like, even in the Hellblade games, especially the second one, I didn't seek out any of the like collectible things really.
I feel like we're learning a lot about you, and I
Yeah.
don't know that we're enjoying it.
if it's a game where the gameplay is like more of the focus,
Yeah.
where
To
it's
be
like combat or like exploring the
Yeah.
world or doing puzzles and stuff, the reward for that is getting your collectible.
I was gonna say you did Riddler trophies and stuff when you played.
Yeah,
Arkham.
I did Assassin's Creed Black Flag 100%. Like if it's a game
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that where the gameplay rewards you with a collectible or whatever, I'll get them. But this is like, oh, I happened to turn left down the darker hallway
Yes.
because I knew that right was lit up, which means that's going to progress the story. So I went left, slowly walked, picked up my doll, and then I went right.
I feel like a lot of your issue could be solved if you just ran like a normal game.
Like, yeah, if the game lets you run.
Not even then. It's if the
It's just
collectible
mindless.
gameplay is just go pick it up.
Yeah.
That doesn't
I mean,
do anything for me.
Even
I
if I had to
assume-
move 2 boxes and put them on switches to get that doll, I think that would be more engaging
Yeah.
than just like walking left instead of right.
I assume it's probably
Linda
it
picking
takes
up a
very
box.
minimal effort to make a collectible, and so they're just kind of like,
might
you
as
know
well
what,
have
we're
it.
just gonna go
Well,
ahead
yeah,
and put
and I-
these in.
I
And
did like how in the quarry the collectibles meant more. Like
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
just
They gave
Yeah.
you little hints.
they
and stuff.
ultimately screwed us.
yeah, most of the collectibles in this game were, hey,
Literally-
you play
literally
Dead by Daylight. Isn't that cool? We did a
Here's a-
little thing.
Here's a relique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which it back on Hellblade real quick, the like collectible in that of whatever that like light was around the tree or
Yeah,
whatever,
in the sequel.
that was, I literally never came across anything that looked remotely like that
No,
again.
you had to really be seeking
like
those out.
I was on the lookout for them. Like I was paying attention for like different branches or paths. No,
It was like the faces in the first game. Like they were
Yeah.
very obscure. Yeah.
well, and I'm sure there are some people that really enjoyed this game that are like, cool, I'm ready to go for another run where I get all the collectibles or whatever. But
Yeah, for like
Yeah.
the small percentage of people that
I-
click with a game
Mhm.
and want to really live in it.
But I do think the way that most other supermassive games have gone, where they try to like tie it to like, here's a vague vision that'll probably get you killed or something,
Yeah.
like is a better way to do it.
Maybe if the reward was a little more rewarding, that would help. Like you said that it was a running problem, and I said no, it was more of a gameplay problem.
Mhm.
But it could also, the reward just wasn't interesting. Like maybe if you collect them all, you get some like interesting
Yeah.
thing, but
Yeah, I
that
haven't-
wasn't very clearly conveyed as you're playing.
Yeah, I didn't look that up, and also, like I said, I think it's definitely like a lot of I think this game, like the Dead by Daylight thing you asked earlier, like does that help it or hurt it? And I think it's kind of a little bit of both. Like I think if you are a Dead by Daylight fan, picking up the little collectibles and being like, that's this killer, or whatever, is like a cool, it's kind of like a little fan servicey thing. But in this group where we were playing with like 3 people who I'm pretty sure have never played Dead by Daylight, 2 people who have played a match or 2,
Yeah, I've
and
played
then
like
me,
one evening.
who's played like 150 hours of it. Like,
there was that one that we picked up and like part of it like sprang off and shot and was like a jump scare. That was kind of fun.
But as someone who's played 150 hours of Dead by Daylight, was that enough from this game to be like,
I mean, I think I enjoyed it probably more than you guys did, but I also don't think that it helped it as much. Like, I think there was a lot that for everything that helped because it was tied to Dead by Daylight also hurt it because it was tied to Dead by Daylight, where it's like in every other game, picking up these things gives you a little like hint or gives you more of like a story thing. Whereas this, it's just like, this is a stuffed.
That's from Dead by Daylight.
Yeah.
Even if you like picked up the relic and it showed you a flash of who it actually was, like in Dead by Daylight, would at least you'd be advertising for Dead by Daylight and be kind of interesting.
Or even if it was like some written, like we weren't going to read it, but like even if there was, even if there was some like written,
call us out like that.
Even if there was some like written lore or something that was further explaining like what the fuck was going on in the game, like that would still help a little bit. But like, because it was literally just like, this is the trapper from Dead by Daylight.
Even if there was evidence of like Augustine studying them and making like versions of them and being like enthralled by the killers and wanting to create her own, could have been something. But
I feel
like these felt very collectible-y versus like most of the other ones in the other games feel like, yeah, it's a collectible, but also there's some sort of tie to the world, you know?
I do think maybe I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to.
Okay.
It's a new thing for you.
He's not wrong.
Everyone just sits here quiet.
Wow. I do think it made the experience where I was playing in the 60s as Sam a little spookier because we didn't know we were coming back. So I was trying to explore the entirety of the sewers while I thought the killer was chasing me. And that felt very scary. And I was really not happy about trying to explore it all to try and find the collectibles because, number one, we didn't know that they didn't mean anything. And we didn't know we would go back 18 times.
Well, and it helps get you off the like track a little bit. I don't know if it's like a totally positive thing or not, but it does encourage you to explore the whole environment.
Well, that's what it's for, is to get
Yeah.
you to kind of poke around and not just like
Ultimately, there
autopilot.
was no reason to explore. Like, you found nothing interesting by exploring extra.
Well, and I think there's like that trade-off too of like, if it had just been like a linear, straightforward path, then there would have been like, it would have felt maybe a little bit too railroady for some people. I think some of it is like games literacy, where like you were talking about earlier, where it's like, well, this is clearly the direction it wants me to go, and this is clearly the side direction that has a collectible down it. Like, I think, you know, these games are not always played by people that have that same level of video game literacy where it's like, oh, I can tell what the developers are trying to direct me at.
We think that, but I feel like casual gamers are just playing like Mario Kart.
Well, I mean,
like,
it
feels like kind of too obscure a franchise to be like, yeah, casual gamers are playing this. I don't know if casual.
Well, they
gamers
are
have
if they
heard
get
of
roped
this.
in by their friends, like Abby.
But it's one of those where it's like, to make it feel a little bit more tense, like I can understand putting other side paths down it, but at the same time, it's like,
I did not realize that that's what the light was trying to tell me. I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea that they were trying to steer me with
this
the
is
light.
proving my point right here.
Zero clue that they were trying to direct me with anything in the environment. I was wandering hardcore. I wasn't even like super trying.
Not even looking for the yellow paint.
Yeah, I was going to say,
looking for the
Delaney's walking
collectibles.
through Tomb Raider, and it's like, how do I get up this cliff? As there are very obvious like white spots going up the cliff.
Yeah, no, I don't.
But yeah, like I get it, but it is, I think, too, one of those things where it's like we talked about earlier this month on another episode, where once you kind of figure out what the game is doing, it becomes a little bit less spooky, where it's like, you know, that you can kind of freely go explore and pick up a collectible without being killed, because it's like, oh, the game's not going to kill me. You know?
Yeah, like the first section I played is Maddie, because Dylan and I shared Maddie. So our first play session, Dylan played her, and then in the second one, I played her definitely once, possibly twice, I think.
I think you played most of her, and then at the very end when we were running from
when it was actually
Frankstone.
serious. So like the first time I played as Maddie was like solving the quote unquote puzzle in the tower to get into her secret zone, and there was no thought involved at all Like I literally was just sprinting to like around the zone until I found pick it up. Okay, cool. Go downstairs, pick up thing. Okay. And then it was just not quite button mashing, but like clicking through. Like that Tumblr puzzle was like barely a puzzle. And that was not scary at all.
I did look at that puzzle and go, oh, I'm glad that wasn't me. And then you figured it out immediately. So I couldn't test if I would have figured it out on my own. But I did go, oh, thank goodness. I did not want to be the one.
Yeah.
I was already getting yelled at for getting lost.
It's something we referenced, I think, in our last episode, but the scariest part of these games is being the person playing and being heckled by the people not playing. Like, that's the most stressful part. The game itself's not that scary.
More about
where
our
you're like,
than the game.
I can't mess this skill check up or I'm going to get killed, and then everyone's going to stare at me and be like, wow, good job.
I was like, I'm not anxious because I'm going to get killed. I'm anxious because they're going to see me get killed.
Or you've been sitting there, making fun of people because they didn't get the skill checks, then you get one and you're like, oh man, that was harder than I expected. Now
Abby is nodding with supreme satisfaction right now.
It's rude.
Well,
it was a bit weird that they like split up the tutorials for that, where it's like Abby got the tutorial for like how to do the skill check, and then like 3 other people had to do the generator skill check from Dead by Daylight, and they were like, I've never done this before in my life. I don't know how this works.
With much higher stakes.
Yeah, I mean,
and like I play like Dredge, for example, games that have kind of that like press the thing in the space, but like the thing loops around, so if you miss it, you get to click press the button again.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've played 2 matches of Dead by Daylight together. You've seen it before.
That was so long ago.
Dumbass.
So, you guys have any final thoughts on just the overall experience before we move into our verdicts?
I mean, it was fun. It was a good little get together activity, but it wasn't really spooky.
I would still play another one. Like, this is not that was so bad. I'm not going to do another one. But I think
Halloween comes every year. We need content every year. So
I would prefer if the people that made the quarry make another one like the quarry.
Same people made this game.
Oh,
it doesn't feel like it.
This
Not
one does feel
bit.
the most divergent from like the Dark Pictures anthology. You can kind of see like, oh, okay, I get it. This is like a cheaper, shorter version of a game like The Quarry.
Yeah.
This one did definitely feel like it diverged a lot more.
I definitely thought this was a different company that made this.
It felt like we were talking before we started recording. It felt much more business transactional between Dead by Daylight and Supermassive versus something they were actually passionate about making.
Yeah, I had the thought when Dylan was talking earlier about it feels like a modern day licensed game, which it is a licensed game, but not like
just
in
another
a way
video game license.
Yeah, in a way that they made it in like they would make licensed game in like 2005 or 2008. Like it's a tie-in game with a Marvel movie that came out, not a passion project.
Yeah, well, and like we were talking earlier too, and I was convinced that this game, like, because they announced it at like the Game Awards last year, and so I was like, okay, like, so they're probably like leading up, they're going to release this game, and then like there's going to be a tie-in in Dead by Daylight too, where it's like this is a new killer, or this is like new survivors that you can play as, and they're tied to this game or whatever. And so I thought, because there were definitely a few times where we ran into like an occasional like technical bug or like I think
the hovering glass of scotch.
And then like overall, I think there's like, maybe you guys could have spent a little bit more time on, some of these aspects of it. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe some of this was this way because they were really trying to hit like a deadline, but like nothing from this game has shown up in Dead by Daylight.
Like, and I feel like it's disappointing.
And so like at that point I'm like, oh, okay, like I can understand the killer not being there because like they'd have to like figure out what his powers and whatever are, but like just adding a survivor or two or like skins or something, it would make sense. It's like, but I think all that there is like if you bought the deluxe edition of the game, you can wear like a shirt in the game.
This is kind of like,
and so it's kind of like I guess I expected there to be more of like a crossover.
Yeah.
And so I was confused when there wasn't. So
because the survivors would be really easy to tie in, right? I assume they're just like,
well, you wouldn't
do they
even have
have
to
special abilities with survivors, or it's
They
literally
have-
just a skin?
they have like perks, but they do also just have skins, but also like they don't have all the survivors play the exact same way.
Yeah, so,
and
like,
so it's
just
just the
add-
perks.
They could have easily added Linda and Chris and Bonnie and
Yeah,
whoever.
That was my thinking. Was like it's
Jaime.
surprising that they didn't at least add the survivors. You know,
Robert,
so
Sam,
Chad.
Stan,
What'd you think, Joe?
Augustine.
It wasn't.
Yep.
I like playing these games, and then I get to the end and go, that wasn't good.
Yep.
Like which one?
It's like not objectively good, but we had fun with it. It's
Yeah.
kind of usually.
Yeah, I mean,
the-
I did really like the quarry. Like I would play the quarry multiple times. I don't know if just with my gaming habits, if I would like make a point to go buy the quarry so I could like sit on my own and play it multiple times. But I was like, yeah, I could do that again. I definitely can picture myself when I was in college. I would have sat there with like that end screen of Frank Stone and gone and seen a bunch of the other decision points. Particularly on, we just finished the game and then you can see that view. If I had gone and looked up like some of the Reddit posts and wiki pages first and then looked at that screen, I would not have like kept going. But which Man of Medan was another one that was like in the moment was kind of like, okay, like this isn't great, but like I'm kind of interested in seeing how this goes. And then you get to the end of Man of Medan and you go, that's it. Oh, okay. That was a little bit of a letdown.
Which one's that one?
That's
That's the one on the boat.
Oh, yeah.
A very abrupt ending.
I feel like a lot of the Supermassive games struggle with like ending pacing.
Yeah.
which
And I imagine the next one will be exactly the same. It'll have that kind of horror thriller element. And I'll want to see how it ends.
yeah.
And then I'll get to the end and go, that could have landed better.
It's set
Yeah.
in space.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Ooh.
next one's like a sci-fi one, but there is also that like difference between like the Quarry and Until Dawn, and then like the Dark Pictures
Dark Pictures.
anthology
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this,
yeah,
where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like there's very clear the Quarry and Until Dawn are
It's like their AAA
levels
offerings.
above,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And those are the ones I think that you're talking like I would gravitate more towards those, and actually could see myself replaying this. And there are things that don't scratch my particular itch of if I was sitting down playing a single player game, but they're actually pretty fun overall. Versus like I don't know that I'd replay for like Frankstone or
Well, yeah, 'cause
Man of Medan.
It
So-
felt like the Dark Pictures anthology was like them continuing to tinker with the concept and come up with stories, but not put in like, this is going to sound so rough, but I didn't think that they could make the games worse than they make the Dark Pictures anthology. And then they made Frank Stone. And then I was like, oh, no, this is what it's like when you don't even put in as much effort, or you put weird constraints on yourself because it's a licensed thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if Frank Stone was worse than
yeah,
Man of Medan.
I was gonna say. So Joe, you've played The Quarry, Man of Medan, Frank Stone. Any others?
I've played a little bit out of one of the
House of
other
We
Ashes.
started House of Ashes, I think.
ones. Yeah, I when Aubrey and I were dating,
Mhm.
I played whatever one starts with the soldiers in the Middle East.
House of Ashes.
Yeah, we all
I remember
started
I
that one.
started that one and like just didn't go anywhere with it because I was like, I'm playing a walking simulator, and I really have a hard time playing a walking simulator just
Yeah.
on my own.
So
Yeah.
where would you? So of the three you've played, where would you rank that? Like, what's number one, number two, number three?
I would go Quarry number 1, Frankstone number 2, and then Man of Medan number 3.
Okay, and then we'll go like least amount of these played to most amount of these played. So I think Abby and Andrew are next. So you guys have played The Quarry, Frankstone, and Man of Medan.
And
And
then
a
we
little
started
bit of
the
House
House
of
of
Ashes.
Ashes.
It was a few chapters of House
Yeah.
of Ashes.
We got to
We
where
got to the part where it
generator-
was about to actually
yeah,
start.
we were
So-
encountering the monster, but I would basically have Joe's ranking, except I would swap Man of Medan and Frank Stone because I thought that at least Man of Medan, I thought it had more charm.
and the pacing was better.
Ileana, you did more in
Yeah.
Man of Medan.
And it was a little bit spookier
Mhm.
because I did play
Yeah.
when I had the hallucinations in that game, and I was
Like
spooked out.
the parts in the ship are good, but I'm I'm watching someone or two guys on YouTube are playing Man of Medan, and I forgot that how much time the game spends on like the opening scuba
boat.
diving and the fishing boat
yeah.
and the pirates, and it takes so long to get to the like they're on this ship and spooky things are happening.
Well, all of Frankstone is like that part of Man of Medan.
Yeah, I was gonna say
It is.
Like
I felt like those bits of Man of Medan were really
Worse
rough.
than
Those
the-
characters were not good.
Yeah.
I feel like the Frank Stone one started off a lot faster.
My part at the beginning was spooky.
I had
Yeah.
like one opening chapter of spooky stuff, and then it was just a whole game of nothing. And
Yeah.
then
5
Oh,
minutes.
and
It was like
empty
the
chapters.
opposite of the
Yeah.
other games. Like it started off really fast.
Yeah, well, because I think the quarry for how long to beat had like about 9 hours, and I feel like for like the first 3 hours, it's kind of like build up, like character, or there's a little bit of spooky at the beginning. There's that build up and character development, and then I felt like most of the last like 2/3 of the game was decently like.
Yeah. Because didn't we break that one up into 3?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it was like the first one was like, oh my God, is this session ever going to end? And then the second one was like, okay, well, it's 11 o'clock. We need to
Yeah.
cut it. And then we did the last
Yeah,
one.
because
yeah,
our
stuff was
first
happening.
Yeah.
our first play session I think was like just when stuff was starting to
Yeah. And
happen.
I feel like most of the Supermassive games follow that sort of formula of spooky at the beginning, a little bit like a third, a build up, and then the last 2/3 is like where all the real spooky stuff starts happening. But I think that varies a little bit. Like Man of Medan was definitely a lot heavier at the beginning. Frank Stone was almost all character development build up with none of the spooky. Little Hope I felt like was probably like way quicker getting into all the spookiness. So yeah. Delaney or Aubrey, where would you rank the ones? Because you've also, in addition to the ones we've been talking about, you guys have played Little Hope. And
The quarry was definitely the best one. Easily. I don't think anybody's debating that.
yeah, we have to play Until Dawn next so that there's something that could potentially beat it. So
I think the story of Little Hope was easier to follow. Like, I feel like with Little Hope, they were like, we're going to narrow this down. We're not going to try and go over the top. It felt more contained in the right amount of story. So I think I would put that one second. And
Little
then-
Hope is my favorite of the Dark Pictures anthology so far.
And I would do, I think, Man of Medan, and then this one is my least favorite. I think this one, but I will say, out of fairness to Man of Medan, that was the first one I had played. And so my expectations there were none. And this is the one we played coming right off of the quarry. Well, not right off of, but that was the last one we played. And so my expectations were way higher, because why would one you made after that be absolute trash?
yeah.
Like,
In theory,
like you've
we
proven
learned something.
You've proven you can make a good one. And
Well-
Man of Medan you just made the worst one after you made the best one.
Well, in theory, that's what they did, though, because it was Until Dawn and then Man of Medan. And so I agree with that lineup. I think Man of Medan was better paced in terms of gameplay. And so even though you were making like dumb dialogue choices or exploring in an underwater plane or stuff like that, you did more actively throughout that game. Whereas I felt like a lot of the casting of Frank Stone was just people talking at you
Yeah.
or to you.
Yeah.
And then occasional moments of exploration. And then, your chapter would end and we're moving on. Like, it just, the pacing and like balance between gameplay and story choices and all of that felt off with the casting of Frank Stone.
Yeah.
I say as someone who didn't play our first session, like, because Dylan and I shared a character, so. But also, Maddie was not,
She didn't play a lot.
she wasn't a super involved character.
Yeah.
How would you rank them, Dylan?
I would definitely put Quarry at number 1. Out of the Dark Pictures, I liked Little Hope the best. I did like Frank Stone better than I liked Man of Medan. I did not like Man of Medan was fine for what it was, but
I think Frank Stone had a better concept than
yeah.
Man of Medan did.
and some of that could just be that I also enjoyed Dead by Daylight, and so like that was the thing that pushed it over. I hear House of Ashes is really good eventually if we ever finish that, or if I play it
We're
by
gonna
myself.
have to restart that.
Yeah.
I don't.
And I
Like-
hear The Devil in Me is bad.
Yeah, so I my list would look a lot like Joe's. So I liked Man of Medan the least out of all of them. So
It is fun when we all get our characters and we learn which ones we hate over the course of the game.
yeah,
I
because
feel like it's a little like we have no
it just
control
starts and
over
it's
it.
like, here's this character. Who wants to be him? And then like you pick him and it's like, oh, this guy's a piece of shit.
Like we have no control over it, but it's a little fun to find out who's going to be the most obnoxious character.
Like Andrew, I'm going to be Ashley Tisdale. Oh, she's cheating on her husband who lost a limb in a car accident that was her fault.
Oof.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
she didn't even look like Ashley Tisdale. So.
I think we can easily say the best character in this one was Sam Green, badge number 424.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move
No
into
arguments, I win.
let's move into our verdicts for the casting of Frank Stone. So the way we rate games on the F and Gamer review scale is A through F, the classic letter grading scale, except that above A, we have S tier. S is a masterpiece. I don't think
I
there's
don't
too
think
much
you need
risk
to go over that. I
of
don't-
this one getting rated
I
S.
think you needed to explain that. You could have just left that at A through F.
With all that being said, I'll kick it off. I'm torn because when you start to like get into the beyond C territory, is like the game is non-functional and broken. So like with that being said, I think I would put Frank Stone at like a C minus, a D plus. Like we had fun together, but as a game, like as its own thing, this one's pretty low for me.
But I think you have to look at it in that context. Like, I would never
Maybe,
play-
but we could also play any of the others in that same
Yeah, no, that's fair.
situation.
Like, but this is not a game I would ever consider playing by myself, much like I would never play Mario Party by myself. Like, it's just not that kind of game for me. Like, it's a social game. Like, it's gonna be how I would rank it would also be based upon how much fun we had as a group, which is not fair to the game, because if you just have really shitty friends, then...
Well, and as
ratings are subjective, so you can.
It's okay. You can rank it however
going
you
off
want.
of that thought process, like as a group, as we've played The Quarry and House of Ashes
Yeah.
and Man of Medan together, this has been my least favorite.
Yes.
I think it was the worst experience of all the ones
Yeah.
we've played so far. So, Dylan, how about you? Where would you put this one?
I think if you're playing with like a group of friends for the first time, you could get it into maybe like C plus B minus range. Personally, I think by itself, for me, it's like a solid C, and a lot of that's probably because I enjoy Dead by Daylight. Like I definitely don't think you're wrong if you're putting this game at a D, or even an F. Ratings are subjective, so you can kind of put them wherever it was. But for me personally, I'd put this at a C. Like, it was definitely not my favorite. It wasn't my least favorite Supermassive game, but I think the biggest thing was I could see more potential, and I have played enough of them to be like, you could have done a little bit more.
You saw where
with
this one
You
fell
could have
short.
Yeah, like there were things that you could have done with this one that would have made it a little bit better, I think. So,
Aubrey, how about you?
Yeah, right there at the C minus kind of range. And for things that I've mentioned, I feel like the pacing in terms of like activities and stuff that you can do, ways that you can interact with the environment. In terms of gameplay, this felt like the weakest of the Supermassive games. And then the story was an interesting concept and a neat concept that I don't think they carried off very well, which feels a touch unfair to like grade, because it is like the information that you do find out is based on how you play and how you do on certain things. But
Even if we had gotten all the information.
yeah, well, and like reading up on it after the fact and getting all the information is just, yeah. Like if we decided as a group to replay The Quarry and try and not get all the Hackett's killed, I would be totally down for that.
Yeah.
If we we're going to try and do House of Ashes again and like get into that, or even Man of Medan again, that'd be like, yeah. But knowing that all signs point to arriving at the campsite, just for me kills any desire for replay value.
Yeah. And I think this game being the one that wants you to replay it the most is like not in its favor. Like there's a lot of story stuff that really only makes sense the second round through, I think. And it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Abby, how about you?
I'd probably give it like a C-, but it's kind of like what Delaney said. Like, I would never just play this game by myself, and it definitely makes having a good group of people that you're playing with makes this game. So like the game was kind of slow and boring or whatever, but because there was a little bit of like jump scares and stuff like that, like having a group that interacts with it makes the whole experience better. So, I mean, the game might not be the best game, but it's still a fun thing to do with a group of people instead of just hanging out and looking at your phones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we still were kind of
Or
doing that.
falling asleep.
I mean, we're still doing that in between, but like, it was okay.
Yeah. It's like B horror movie fun. There are plenty of moments where if we had popcorn, we would have thrown it at the screen at some of the things that they said.
Yeah.
Delaney?
I'd say C, but zero regrets. Would I don't know if not enough time has passed. Not enough time has passed for me to forget the story, but would play games like this or this one potentially again in 5 years.
5 years, all right. Joe, bring us home.
C, passed the class and gets to move on to the next one, but doesn't get any fanfare for it.
Yeah, it
Not
met the
graduating with
requirements,
honors.
but like just barely.
Yeah. So basically, if you've never played a Supermassive game before,
69.7.
this is
Don't start with this one.
Well, it's either start with this one so
Yeah.
that everything else after this is
End
just.
with the quarry.
But know
If
that
you're
you
in-
should play the others and
but
this
yeah.
should not be.
But yeah, if you're looking for like a good Supermassive game, maybe this is like not the one to pick up. Maybe go for the Quarry or Until Dawn or.
Well, I mean, like you said, maybe do the
YOLO.
opposite. Like this
Mhm.
one isn't the best, so like totally start with this one.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Can
quick.
only go up.
It's pretty quick and easy, and then like work your way to the quarry.
Only if you're really intrigued by the concept and really, really want to play all of the games would I recommend you start with this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this might just turn you off from the
Exactly.
idea
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, if you're a Dead by Daylight lore fan, this might, be way more interesting to you. But
But as stated, beyond relics, there's actually not a ton of like there's no like lore implications. The entity is not explained. We don't know why Augustine cares about the entity.
well, but a lot of the Dead by Daylight lore only occurs in like a written journal entry form sort of situation. And so like being able to see the entity doing stuff or whatever, I could see being more interest. Like for all of that we talk about the campsite, like literally all you see in actual Dead by Daylight is just them at the campsite as a loading screen. Like you don't actually see.
It's like a menu screen.
Yeah. So I can see it being more interesting to like, oh, there's that thing that I read about or whatever being interesting. But yeah, it's not like this is giving
it's
you.
neat to see her summoning the entity so
Yeah.
she can offer it up a killer, but it doesn't explain anything about the entity or
Well,
like what it is or what she
I
wants.
don't
or
know. I'm not that into Dead by Daylight lore to know if this revealed anything or not. So, but
it
yeah.
didn't teach me, who knows almost nothing about Dead by Daylight, anything about Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, this is not going to give you the crash course on Dead by Daylight lore, but it's
Which feels
I
like a
don't-
missed opportunity.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
in terms of missed opportunity too, this is a crossover between the spooky horror games by whoever they are.
Supermassive.
There it is. Thank you.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Dead by Daylight.
Behavior Interactive is Dead by Daylight.
And Dead by Daylight. So presumably they're hoping, at least I would think that they're hoping that people who play one type of game would now play this crossover and be like, oh my gosh, I should play that one. That I have no desire to play Dead by Daylight after this has done nothing to bring me over to that side.
It is on Game Pass.
Yeah, that's great.
Not
None of us
enough
are
for
going to
me
play that. Like, no
tried
part of this has made me interested in Dead by Daylight at all and be like, oh my gosh, let me get in on that so that they can make more money off of me. No,
What if you could play as Nicolas Cage?
go on.
That's literally
That's it. That's all there is. There's no lore. There's no explanation.
If we are ranking the ability to play as Nicolas Cage versus this game, Nicolas Cage is the bigger draw for me to play Dead by Daylight.
All right, we're going to close this thing out by reading off the responses that we got from our Discord community. Dylan, you posed the question, so what did you ask our Discord community, and what did they respond with?
Let's see. The question that I asked was, do you like Supermassive Games? And why or why not? And do you have a favorite? Because I figured us, who I would call Supermassive fans, ? I mean, I feel like
with Majesty, we're probably up there in terms of like the number of people who consistently talk about these games.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like on the grand scheme of things, we are a little bit more plugged into the Supermassive Games side of things versus the regular people.
We might be considered like experts at this point.
I haven't joined the subreddit, but I've visited it several times.
Yeah, so it's figured asking people specifically about Frank Stone was not the way to go, considering that even half of us didn't know Frank Stone was coming out. So
just make it more broad. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So to answer, so we have Ryan Player One from the List Off podcast, who commented that sometimes he likes Supermassive Games. Their games are very hit and miss for him. He really enjoyed Until Dawn, but didn't like The Quarry. The characters are always interesting and the writing is good, but the gameplay is sometimes lacking. The exception for this being his favorite game from Supermassive, House of Ashes.
Oh.
Thanks, Ryan.
Saying the writing and characters are always good is so not true. In
How
my
dare you?
experience.
It's always excellent.
You sounded like Bob the Tomato on VeggieTales.
I was waiting for that for so long.
So Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog says he's only played Until Dawn and The Quarry, but liked both of them, Until Dawn being a bit better in his opinion. They're both fun teen horror movie experiences, and I like how they get you to just roll with the consequences of your choices.
Yeah.
It sounds like we do need to play Until Dawn since we all have The Quarry at the top right now.
What's Until Dawn? Have you all played Until Dawn?
I've watched like a playthrough of it, but I haven't played it.
So that's an option that we...
Yeah, it was the first one.
It was
came
like their
out
first
in like
game.
2013, 2014.
And they didn't do the
2015.
like controller passing multiplayer stuff back then. So you
They
kinda,
might have updated it. I don't actually
maybe
know.
the remake has
They
it,
did. They did release a remake. It's got Hayden Panettiere in it.
Oh.
Save the cheerleader, save the world.
Exactly.
So who gets to be Hayden Panettiere?
Andrew will probably pick her.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
Duh.
he always picks the female protagonist that's played by an actual actress that he's aware of. So, let's see. Katie Shesko says she's only played Until Dawn, but enjoyed it. Wanted to go back and try to get all of the stuff and endings, but it never happened. And then John with no H has also only played Until Dawn, and he, like Katie, needs to go back and get the different endings. What he has played, though, he thoroughly enjoyed.
So it sounds like if you liked Until Dawn, Dark Pictures did not do enough to necessarily pull you in.
Unless it's House of Ashes.
True, some
So-
people like that one.
It's apparently the best.
Yeah.
So the two we haven't played are the best.
So
Yeah.
they say.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, we played.
I
some
will
of
say
House of
Until
Ashes.
Dawn was on the options for this time, but several people thought it was going to be too spooky.
Andrew.
What?
It
I
is
feel like
set.
that's false. I don't think I said that.
I
once.
don't know. I don't.
It's set in a snowed-in mountain cabin. And,
Spooky.
Yeah, people are being
Spookily.
picked off by monsters.
That does.
I don't
sound
like the
spooky.
mountains and the woods in the dark. So
It's mostly set at night.
Do you like murder mills?
Because you have to last.
yeah.
Until dawn.
Oh, dun,
They said the thing.
dun.
Thank you, everybody, so much who responded to that. We really appreciate it. If you want to be part of future episodes, we're going to be posting questions more often in our Discord for things like this, for future segments. So if you want to be part of future discussions, future episodes, join our Discord. There's a link in every podcast description. With all that being said, thank you all so much for joining. This is normally the time where we do housekeeping. You probably know we have a YouTube channel and that we want you to like, subscribe, We want you to rate our podcast.
If you don't want to play Frankstone, but you want to watch us play it, there's maybe going to be a full playthrough on our YouTube channel as like a bonus video.
So you can hear how scared Abby and Delaney actually were.
Yeah, even though they said it was not scary.
We have the audio from that, don't we?
Yeah.
I don't remember any of that.
I hope your mother doesn't listen to it.
My mother?
Yeah, your mother.
Should be all right.
This will conclude our October spooky Halloween theme month of content. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. With that being said, I will kick it to our guests to see if they have anything that they want to shout out or plug as we close this episode. Abby, is there anything that you want to shout out or plug or say in closing?
Nope.
All right, Delaney?
Also, no.
Perfect.
You were a little worried.
Yeah, I was a little worried. Joe, what about you?
I do have a YouTube channel. If you play WoW, I upload stuff fairly regularly. Can be found at KazakDK, KHAZAKDK.
Aubrey, you usually have some pointless trivia tidbit or something at the end of the episode.
That
you
was
like to shout out.
hostile.
I'm sorry. You work under these conditions?
Do you have anything in the chamber?
She volunteers.
I know.
It's even worse.
Volunteer to be treated like this. No, I didn't think of anything to say.
Okay, nothing about like new ingredients in peanut butter that can kill your dog or what. You know, she just brings random stuff to the.
Did I worry about xylitol?
Yes, you.
I do random PSAs. Stuff like, don't let your grandparents buy a lift chair because those will just make them weaker.
Stuff that has nothing to do with it.
I didn't realize this was random fact time.
Uh-oh, cut it off.
All right, Dylan, anything you want to say closing this out? No?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next episode.